So this session is to talk to you about the grant funding pot that we launched, as I said, about a week or so ago. If you flick onto the next slide for me, Cara. So most of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with UK Shared Prosperity Funding and Rural England Prosperity Funding, or UKSPF and REPF, as we have come to refer to it, because otherwise it takes far too long to talk about. So UKSPF is government's replacement of previously European funding that came through via the local enterprise partnership, so operated across Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. So rather than going at that level, now the funding has been allocated directly to local authorities. So Rushcliffe have been allocated just over £3 million, which is a combination of UKSPF and the rural funding pot. And that's over the next 3 years. So we've had some funding that we've spent in this financial year, some that's allocated. So for us, financial year is from the 1st of April. So we've had just over £312,000 that we've had for this financial year, and then we've got an allocation next year and an allocation in 24-25. Government have set out what those allocations are, so that's not a decision that we have made in terms of how much is allocated in each year. That's something that government have specified. So we have the pot that we are talking about this evening is for the next financial year. So as of the 1st of April, we will have some more funding come through from government, and that's what this pot is coming from. We would then potentially look to do a similar thing in the next year. So it could be that if you've got a project that isn't quite ready for this year, it could be something that we look at in the next financial year. So UK Shared Prosperity Fund is part of government's levelling up agenda. So it's providing funding for local investment by March 2025. So as I said, that's the kind of overall programme, but for this grant pot, it's for the next financial year. And the main objectives really are around that local pride in place. So because it's all part of the levelling up agenda, it's really that's what government want us to focus on really. And so for us, that is about part of the reason that we've developed this grant pot is because we want to make sure that there is a spread of projects across the whole of Rushcliffe. And you know, many of you and your organisations will know best what's needed in some of those communities. So rather than the Borough Council spending all of the pot, it's kind of making it available to other groups, to businesses and community groups to spend as well. And because Rushcliffe is a more rural area, we've been given a top up to our UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is the Rural England Prosperity Funding. That is available for all of the borough except for West Bridgeford and an area around kind of Tollerton airfield. So and that pot, so the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is a mixture of capital and revenue funding, whereas the rural pot is capital only, as you can see on the slide there. And government have said that's specifically about tackling challenges that that rural areas face more than other areas. So I will hand over to Cara to go through our next couple of slides.
Thank you. So I imagine this is all kind of relatively familiar to you if you have come to us via our website or read our guidance document, but I'm going to run through it anyway. So we are offering grants of between £5,000 and £40,000. For the vast majority of the projects that we are expecting to see, capital and revenue funding will be available. That is with the exception there's 2 rural fund interventions, which are for capital only, but you'll be aware of that if those are the interventions that you're interested in, and we would make that clear when we speak to you. So for private sector organisations, we are expecting a 60% financial match as a minimum. So it's not to say that that caps the size of the project, but that's the minimum that we would like to see. And then for non-private sector organisations, so community groups, town and parish councils, voluntary groups and other groups, we would like to see a 30% match. That can be in kind. And we've said there that match is desirable, so it's not essential. But when we are assessing applications, the level of match will come into our assessment process and will be considered when we're looking at applications. So as you'd expect, projects must be delivered in Rushcliffe. So the organisation itself does not necessarily have to be based in Rushcliffe as long as the activity being funded is solely for Rushcliffe. And then projects must be completed ahead of March 2024. And that is an absolute deadline. So we'll be checking in throughout the year to see how progress is being made on the applications that we fund, and that will be an absolute deadline, March 2024. So we'll be keeping in touch to make sure that that is realistic. So that's what's available. So what can be funded? So again, if you've read the guidance document, you will see that there are 33 interventions. And interventions are the word that government has used for their areas of focus or priorities, or you could use any word, but intervention is the word that government has used. So there are 33 of those, and they are all listed in our guidance document. But across all of those interventions, there are a number of kind of key objectives which tie them all together. So those are listed on the screen there. So those are around social fabric and fostering a sense of local pride and belonging. So there's lots in there to do with green spaces and community projects. Another objective is around resilience and healthy and safe neighbourhoods. There's lots in there around designing out crime, for example. Another objective is creating jobs and boosting community cohesion, and that's really broad. So that can be to do with business support, it can be to do with hospitality and leisure and the visitor economy. And then there is an intervention, or an objective rather, sorry, there around networking and collaboration. And then lastly, there's an objective around increasing private sector investment. So as I say, there's 33 interventions, but each one of those interventions will in some way fit under one of those objectives. So if you haven't had a chance to read our guidance document, I thought I would just run through an example of an intervention. So this one has been picked at random. It's in no way a particular priority for us among the 33. It's just one example. So the intervention here is E3, and it's around green spaces, community gardens, watercourses, embankments, and natural features in public spaces. So that's the intervention, and you'll see there's a list of example projects, and that isn't a comprehensive list, that's just indicative. And that list has come from government. So those aren't our projects that we've suggested. Those are projects that government has provided as an example. And then for that intervention, you'll see a list of outputs and a list of outcomes. And these are the really important parts. So it may be that a project aligns with the intervention, but it's not in a position to deliver an output. So if you are delivering a community garden, you have to be able to evidence, for example, amount of green or blue space created or improved. And then ideally, you would be able to demonstrate improved perception of facilities, for example, and you would have to be able to measure that. So you'd have to have done a baseline survey and demonstrate that it had improved. So that is just one example of an intervention. As I say, there's 33. So there's interventions around our town centres and high streets. There's interventions around green spaces, heritage, cultural activities. There's intervention around social action and volunteering. There's interventions around sports, climate change, cost of living. So anything you name, really, there's an intervention that aligns with it. So it really comes down to what's going to deliver outputs and outcomes. And these are the kind of conversations that we really look forward to having with you and kind of getting into the detail of. So outputs and outcomes is what government is looking for, and interventions is what government's looking for. But what are we looking for in addition to that? So intervention alignment, as I say, outputs and outcomes, but really we want to see projects that align with our corporate priorities. And we will share our corporate priorities with you in our corporate strategy, and you'll probably have seen that linked in the guidance document. But corporate priorities around quality of living, around the environment, around sustainable growth. So that's what we want to see alignment with, to make sure that it's kind of fitting with our own priorities as well as the levelling up agenda. And the two are complementary, so it's not difficult to find that alignment. We want to see that there is a need for the project, and really importantly, we want to see that there's added value. So it's not something that is delivered day to day. It's not something that could be delivered without this funding. It's not a statutory responsibility. It's something that is additional to communities or for a business, and we would like to see the evidence of that. And then match funding in place, and that's really important. Pardon me. That's really important because the grant funding will be paid in arrears, so it's really important that match funding is in place ahead of time. Pardon me. And then we need to see that the relevant permissions are in place. So is planning permission relevant? Are there environmental health considerations? Pardon me. Caroline, could I just pass over to you for a second?
Yes, I was going to say, do you want me to take over? If you just go back to the previous slide, Cara. No, I think she's gone off to have a big cough. Okay, so we've advertised the. She's back. Yeah, Cara was just saying about relevant permissions in place. So if, for example, you know, there's anything in food hygiene or anything like that, or if planning permission is required. So basically, we need to know that whatever project you're putting forward and delivering is within the confines of what's allowable. There are going to be considerations about projects that aren't on your land or things like that. So and it's an awareness of stakeholders as well. So if other people have got an interest in a piece of land or a building or whatever it is you're proposing, we will need to have proof that those people are supportive of that project, and it's not going to tread on anybody's toes, basically. So that's really how we're going to sort of assess applications that come in. Obviously, we haven't sent out application forms yet, and they're not available to download, because the approach that we're taking is to have that sort of one-to-one journey with you. So to ensure that we just don't receive a lot of applications that aren't relevant, that aren't filled in properly. So the initial first point of contact is to email us, and I know a lot of you already have, in order to be able to attend this webinar. So what we're offering is basically a pre-application advice service, and my colleague Charlotte has already spoken to some of you. Some people have requested that initial chat anyway, just so that we can make sure that A, it aligns with something, B, it will deliver some outputs and outcomes, and does fit in strategically with what we're trying to achieve. Yeah, we have got the project window, so we'll be accepting applications between the 21st of April up to the 19th of May. Prior to that, and ongoing through that process, Charlotte's the main point of contact at the moment, but we're aware that potentially she might become inundated. So it's going to be a team effort. My focus is more around the business support aspect, whereas Cara tends to be leading on the communities and place projects, but we are all interchangeable, and we all begin with the letter C. So you can call either of us anything as long as it begins with C, and we will respond. So yeah, so once we're satisfied that the project does align, and we potentially think that it would be suitable as an application, at that point we will send you an application form, a sort of invitation to bid, and that will have a specific reference number included in the application, just so we can track where people are, you know, how many applications we've had. Obviously, this is the first time that we've administered a project like this, and there are an awful lot of factors around it. You know, there's the different themes: communities in place, business support, there's the rural funding. We have put it all into one pot to make it easier for people to apply, we think, just because you haven't got to decide which pot to apply into. So it's one application form for all the interventions and for all the capital and revenue. We have got an assessment period after the closing date on the 19th of May, and all being well, we will be notifying successful applicants on the 9th of June, on or around the 9th of June. At this stage, it's quite unclear to us, you know, how many and what value of applications we're going to get. So we're just hopeful that there will be a wide range of activity and proposals put forward, and we're looking forward to working with you. Cara, have I missed anything? Are you able to speak?
I'm alive with a cough sweet. No, missed nothing, and thank you very much. Apologies for that. No, that was perfect.
Okay. So apart from, I know I've just said that we're having one grant pot for everything, but there is a specific intervention, E16, which is around supporting local high streets. And some of you may know, over the past few years, we have always had a bit of a grant pot. Initially, it was for shopfront improvement grants because we had some retail reviews undertaken in some of our high streets and town centres. And that was one of the recommendations for that, was that we provided a grant to businesses to improve the appearance of the frontage of their shops. We ran that for a few years, and then during and post-COVID, we introduced a small business grant focusing on digital support. So if people wanted help with their websites or e-commerce, things like that. And that's been running for a number of years. Both of those schemes, well, the Digital High Street COVID grant will end on the 31st of April. And so we're now using this funding to make it a more general pot for local high street businesses. So this is going to be a separate application. One of the reasons we've included it in this presentation is that we did notice when emails were coming in that there were several high street businesses who this might be more relevant to. So it's basically picking out which one is relevant for yourselves. So the way this differs, it's going to be an ongoing applications assessed on an ongoing basis. So the grant criteria and the application forms are currently awaiting approval from our financial officers. So we haven't got the specific detail of it, but we've recommended that it will be for grants up to about £5,000, to include things like energy efficiency measures, you know, even if it's just replacing light bulbs, things like that, much smaller scale grants. Marketing, promotion, events, equipment purchase, could be coffee machines, something like that, to increase productivity. Again, digital and ICT equipment purchase, could be points of sale, things like that. I'm not the expert, so we're just waiting to see what's coming forward. And again, to improve the shopfront improvements. This obviously isn't an exhaustive list. It can be to improve accessibility, so adaptations to make the shop more accessible, anything to improve the sort of customer experience and productivity, really. We will be requiring a certain degree of match funding. The detail of that will be released once the scheme is announced, hopefully later this week. And as I touched on before, there won't be an application window. This is based on our experience in the past. They will be assessed on an ongoing basis because of the much smaller scale nature of the grants. So I think I've covered everything in there. So we have actually gone through that presentation really rather quickly. So Catherine, am I passing back to you for any potential starter questions?
Yeah. Was that the last slide? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right. Sorry. Thank you. So I think the first thing I'd say is, so great. We're looking forward to hearing your questions, and hopefully that presentation was helpful. what we don't really want to get into on this call is the details of specific projects that you're thinking of. As we've said, we want to have one-to-one conversations with you about projects. So it's not necessarily about your specific project that we're asking questions about. It's more the kind of general overview of the grant pot that you've just heard about. So I can see that we've already had a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll respond to those first while everyone else is thinking of their questions. So the first question in there is, how much funding in total are you budgeted to receive from central government in 23-24? The answer to that is 624,000 of UK Share Prosperity funding and £149,000 of Rural England Prosperity funding for the next financial year. So just to note, not all of that is going into this grant pot. So some of that, for example, in the we're looking at some joint commissioning around business support. So there's some that is being kept for other things, but that's how much we are expecting to get from government. The other thing to say on that is, to secure the funding, we had to submit something called an investment plan to government to set out at a very high level where we thought we were going to spend our money on what types of things. For the UK Share Prosperity funding element, that has been signed off. The Rural England funding hasn't been signed off yet by government because that came at a later date. So we're expecting sign off soon, but clearly that allocation may change. So that's subject to government's final approval. But yeah, so in total, sort of 700 and nearly 800,000 for next year. What does match funding in kind mean, is the next question. That basically means not cash match, really. So staff time, volunteer time, that kind of thing is in kind match funding. Will the bids be assessed independently of one another, or is there likely to be any consideration of bids for the UKSPF that align well with the high street grants and vice versa? So the high street grant part, applications will come in and will just be judged on their own to whether or not they're signed off. The UK Share Prosperity funding, the bigger part that we've explained a little bit more about, there's the application window. So that will close, but obviously we will be keeping a track of who is applying to which pot to make sure that we, because I think we've said in the guidance, and Cara or Caroline or Charlotte, correct me if I'm wrong, that organisations can bid more than once, but not for the same project. So we're making sure that we're keeping an eye on that. Is that right, Cara?
So we've said that grants wouldn't be successful for the same project. So if we had a grant pot in a future year, if the project had been funded in this year, it wouldn't be eligible next year, for example.
Yes. And are national chains eligible for high street grants? We're aiming it at small businesses, the high street grant pot. Penny, I'm conscious you've got your hand up, so I'll come to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I thought it was easier to probably say it rather than type it. Just wanted to ask about people and skills, and if there are any plans for bringing that strand through at all for the district, both for what's currently happening, but also I know there's just been an announcement that people and skills funding can be brought forward nationally. So I just wondered what thoughts were at the moment around that, please.
Yeah, so we hadn't. So I don't know how much everyone else on the call knows, but there are 3 priorities for UK Share Prosperity Fund: business support, communities in place, and people and skills. And government had previously said that the people and skills element should spends only eligible in year 3, unless you can demonstrate that existing provision. So this is because previously they'd funded programmes around sort of employment support from European funding, and quite a lot of that is continuing, so they didn't want duplication. So they kept that for 24-25, unless you could demonstrate that a provision was being lost and you needed to replace that. What they announced on Friday, I think Thursday or Friday last week, is that we can now spend people and skills in this next financial year, so we can deliver activity on that theme. In answer to your question, Penny, we have asked government if that means that they will be bringing some of the spend from year 3 into year 2 to enable us to do that, because we've allocated our funding to this grant pot to other projects, because obviously we have to do that because we have to plan for the year ahead to make sure we've got deliverable projects. It could be that if some things slip that we might be able to do some things around people and skills, but at the moment we don't really have the budget to do that. So we have asked that question of government if we can have some of year 3s in year 2.
Yeah, thank you. So just at the moment then, so if obviously nothing changes, will there be a call later this year for 24/5 people and skills?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just having a look at the questions. Hi, when you say in arrears, what does this mean? So what we mean is that we would expect an organisation who had some grant funding to effectively be able to cash flow that themselves ahead of coming to us for our contribution, so that we could see that they had spent. We understand that might be more of a challenge for smaller organisations, so we could have a conversation about paying chunks of money in instalments, but that's what that means. We would look to an organisation paying upfront and then us reimbursing those costs. Are we looking at a 9-month project if notification's not until June 23? Yeah, so effectively we would have projects running from June until the end of the financial year, so the end of March. Can I apply for more than one grant from the same business, as I have 3 ideas for funding? Yeah, we've said not the same project. So if it was the same organisation can apply more than once, but not for the same project. Can more than one application be made for projects under different interventions in the same financial year? Can more than one?
Do you want me to answer that?
Go on, yeah, sorry.
Yes, they can. And I know that because on the reporting, when we look at a project, it can cover more than one intervention and have outputs and outcomes from more than one intervention. So yes, it doesn't have to exactly fit under one intervention. It can have, yeah, it can go over more than one intervention. I think that answers the question, does it?
Emma?
Oh yeah, can I just, I'm not sure, Caroline, if it does. It wasn't my question, but because I presume your ceiling is 40,000 then in any given financial year. Yeah, so you couldn't go for like each intervention at for a total of more than 40. Because otherwise you could have 33 times 40, that'd be nice. So I presume that's what you mean. You could put an application for multiple E numbers.
Yes, so one application up to £40,000 can be accepted, and it would cover different interventions. We're not saying for each intervention you can put in the maximum £40,000.
But your assessment criteria enables you to put the project in and then show which E numbers it would reach, I presume. That's kind of how, it would normally be. You wouldn't have to put one in for each one. Yeah.
No, and I've just noticed you've put the next question in the chat. Have you already weighted the E numbers?
Yeah.
It's just disappeared. The E numbers based on your corporate priorities. No, we haven't.
And we're not intending to. So there is a question in the application form about how your project aligns with government's priorities and our corporate priorities. But I think because the interventions are all quite broad, you could argue that they probably all do tick boxes. So no, we haven't prioritised them. There's a question there about, do you have a figure in mind for volunteer time, e.g. pounds per hour? And we did we did get this information, didn't we, Cara?
I think it's about £10.42. Pardon me. I think, does that sound right? £10.42.
Yes. Yes. And then there's a question about, can match funding be from a grant from another source? Yes, it can. Kevin. You're on mute, Kevin.
Are you able to type your question into the chat, Kevin? Is that an option?
Can we unmute Kevin?
No, I did try. You can mute people, but not unmute people.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you manage to unmute Kevin, we can, or type it into the chat. Is there any questions from anybody else? No? I think what I'd say is that obviously with the grant guidance is hopefully quite clear, and the information that's actually in our guidance document is quite short, but then I appreciate there is quite a lot of information to read around the interventions and the outputs and outcomes, and all of that information is information that we've taken from government. As Cara said when she explained on that slide, that's not those example projects, and those outputs and outcomes is what government are asking us to deliver with that funding, and therefore that's obviously what we need to see demonstrated when we're giving out grant pots. There's a lot there, and that's why we're saying we want people to come and talk to us ahead of putting in a grant application, because we don't want people to I know some of you will be quite small organisations, or just you, so it's quite a lot to complete an application form, although again we have tried to keep that as simple as possible. So we're there to try and help and advise you and make sure that your project is eligible, and then we can issue you with the application form. So we're here to help, and we're here to support you along the way, really. So please do use us and do have conversations with us about your projects, and we can help identify where outputs and outcomes and things might be able to be delivered.
Just a couple more questions there, Catherine. How do people book on with us? We've got a dedicated inbox, which is UKSPF inquiries at rushcliffe.gov.uk. It will be on our website, but I will also type the email address into the chat box here so everyone has it. And then if you just get in touch with us, and if you can give a brief description of the project that you're interested in discussing, that gives us a head start. But I'll pop the email address in here and you can get in touch with us.
Okay.
Oh, Catherine, there's a question there about feasibility studies. Can they generate e-numbers? Can
feasibility studies generate e-numbers?
I think is the question, can they generate outputs? So a feasibility study is a output.
Oh, right, yes.
Is that the question, I think? If that is the question, then yes is the answer.
Yeah, so yeah, if you did a feasibility study, that would count as an output. And in fact, we've done a few this year with some of our funding that's allocated this year. So yes, we can do that. So yeah, please do get in touch, and we can have a conversation with you about your projects and help with all of the guidance and things. Oh, Caroline's got a question.
It's not a question. What I was going to say is that, as I mentioned previously, Charlotte is the main point of contact. So I just wanted to ask Charlotte, really, if there's anything that would help her in the process if people going to start emailing to request one-to-ones.
I think it's really just what we've said in the guidance, which is just a very brief paragraph outlining what your project's about. And so, you know, I don't need a lengthy description. But the other thing really is don't be at all inhibited about getting in touch if you're still at the project development or thinking stage. And indeed, a number of the inquiries we've had already have been almost sort of pre-application discussions, and I'm very happy to have those. There's no limit on how many times I can talk to you, you know, to get to the point where you're happy about what your project is, and you know, and clear about what it is that you want to deliver. So yes, keep it brief, and don't worry if it's not all there. If you'd like to talk to us about it, we will do that.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else who's got any questions before we go? No, I'm really sorry, Kevin, that you haven't managed to unmute, but if you want to if you want to send us an
Kevin's
email.
details here, so I'll get in touch, Kevin, straight after the meeting, if that's okay, and we can discuss your question. Apologies.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so please do get in touch with us, and we look forward to chatting to some or all of you at some point over the next couple of weeks. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.